During the oppressive Rhodesia's white minority rule, Ndabaningi Sithole emerged as a pivotal figure in the African nationalist movement, founding the Zimbabwe African National Union, ZANU, in 1963 as a militant breakaway from Joshua Nkomo's Zimbabwe African People's Union, ZAPU. His early advocacy for armed resistance against Ian Smith's regime positioned him as a beacon of defiance, but his interactions with the Rhodesian authorities, particularly surrounding his imprisonment and release, have long been shrouded in controversy. While historical records do not reveal explicit secret deals struck solely for personal gain, Ndabaningi's actions, such as his 1969 public renunciation of violence and his involvement in the 1974 release negotiations, have fueled persistent allegations of compromise with the enemy. These moments, often interpreted as self-serving pacts, must be examined against the backdrop of Rhodesia's repressive machinery and the broader geopolitical pressures of the era. Ndabaningi's descent into the Rhodesian prison system began in 1964, shortly after ZANU's formation, when he was detained without trial under emergency laws designed to crush black nationalism. By 1969, he faced formal charges of incitement to violence and plotting against the government, accusations stemming from his earlier calls for armed struggle. During the trial, in a move that stunned his supporters, Ndabaningi publicly disavowed violence, stating in court that he rejected subversive activities and insurgent tactics. This renunciation, documented in contemporary accounts, was perceived by many as a calculated concession to the regime, potentially aimed at securing a lighter sentence or improved conditions. Critics argued that this was tantamount to a tacit agreement with Smith's government, where Ndabaningi traded ideological purity for personal leniency. Although no formal documentation of a deal exists, the timing and context suggest a pragmatic exchange. Ndabaningi's statement aligned with the regime's narrative of black leaders as reformed figures, possibly earning him better treatment amid his ongoing detention. The 1969 episode set the stage for further suspicions. Ndabaningi remained in custody, but his renunciation eroded his standing within ZANU's ranks, where militants like Robert Mugabe began maneuvering to supplant him. By 1974, as the Rhodesian Bush War intensified, external forces intervened to broker a fragile peace. South African Prime Minister John Vorster and Zambian President Kenneth Kaunda orchestrated secret talks to unify fractured nationalist factions and compel Smith to negotiate. In December 1974, Ndabaningi was released alongside other leaders like Komu, ostensibly to attend unity discussions in Lusaka under the African National Council (ANC) banner. This release was not an isolated favor but part of a quid pro quo. The nationalists agreed to a ceasefire and presented a united front in exchange for temporary freedom and a path to constitutional talks. However, Ndabaningi's prominent role in these negotiations raised eyebrows. Reports from the time indicate that while the deal was group-oriented, Ndabaningi's prior renunciation may have made him a more palatable figure to Smith, potentially influencing his selection for release. Accusations swirled that Sithole had privately assured the regime of his moderation, betraying the militant ethos that defined ZANU. These alleged deals culminated in Ndabaningi's participation in the 1978 internal settlement, a public agreement with Smith, Bishop Abel Muzorewa, and Chief Jeremiah Chirahu to form a transitional government known as Zimbabwe Rhodesia. This pact, which promised black majority rule but retained significant white privileges, was widely denounced as a sham designed to perpetuate minority control. Sithole's endorsement of it, after years of professed resistance, reinforced narratives of secret understandings with the regime. While not directly tied to his 1974 release, the settlement echoed earlier compromises, suggesting a pattern where personal political survival trumped collective liberation. Historical analyses portray this as the zenith of Ndabaningi's accommodations, where he aligned with Smith's vision to sideline more radical elements like Mugabe's ZANU-PF wing. In essence, the deals attributed to Sithole were less clandestine contracts and more opportunistic alignments, born from the pressures of incarceration and the allure of negotiated power. The ramifications of Ndabaningi's alleged compromises extended far beyond his personal trajectory, striking at the heart of ZANU's militant identity and the collective aspirations of Africans under colonial yoke. Founded on principles of uncompromising resistance, ZANU embodied the frustrations of a generation weary of gradualism. Ndabaningi's 1969 renunciation of violence, uttered in a Rhodesian courtroom, was interpreted as a direct repudiation of this ethos. By publicly disowning the armed struggle, a cornerstone of ZANU's strategy, Ndabaningi not only undermined the morale of guerrilla fighters but also provided the regime with propaganda fodder to depict nationalists as divided and unreliable. This act alienated hardliners within ZANU, paving the way for Robert Mugabe's ascent in 1974 to 1975, when Sithole was ousted as leader while still in prison. Critics within the movement labeled it a betrayal, arguing that Sithole's words emboldened Smith's forces and prolonged the suffering of Africans by delaying unified armed action. The 1974 release further amplified perceptions of treachery. While the negotiations aimed at nationalist unity, Sithole's involvement was seen by radicals as a dilution of ZANU's independence. Upon release, he agreed to merge factions under the ANC umbrella, a move that temporarily sidelined ZANU's distinct militant voice. This unification, brokered with external powers like Forster, who had his own interests in stabilizing the region, appeared to many Africans as a capitulation to white supremacist agendas. Guerrilla fighters, enduring harsh conditions in the bush, felt abandoned. Sithole's freedom came at the cost of suspending hostilities, allowing Smith's army respite to regroup. The breakdown of talks shortly after, leading to Sithole's brief redetention in 1975 on charges of plotting against rivals, only heightened suspicions that he had prioritized factional maneuvering over the Pan-African cause. In the eyes of ZANU loyalists, this betrayed the sacrifices of thousands, fracturing the movement and extending the war's brutality. By 1978, Sithole's participation in the internal settlement crystallized the narrative of betrayal. Aligning with Smith and moderate figures like Muzorewa, he helped establish a government that granted nominal black rule while preserving white economic dominance and military oversight. This internal solution excluded Mugabe and Como's Patriotic Front, effectively splitting the nationalist front and inviting international skepticism. For Africans across the continent, it represented a profound sellout. Sithole, once a symbol of resistance, now lent legitimacy to a regime that had massacred civilians and enforced apartheid-like policies. The settlement's failure to end the war or gain recognition prolonged the conflict, costing countless lives and resources. ZANU-PF propagandists later portrayed Sithole as a collaborator, a label that marginalized his faction and contributed to post-independence purges. In betraying ZANU's core, Sithole inadvertently bolstered Mugabe's radical wing, but at the expense of unity in the African liberation struggle, echoing divisions that haunted decolonization efforts elsewhere. This schism not only weakened the immediate fight against Rhodesia, but also sowed seeds of enduring factionalism in Zimbabwean politics. Assessing Ndabaningi Sithole's actions through the lens of selfishness reveals a man caught between ambition, pragmatism, and survival, whose choices often prioritized personal agency over collective ideology. As a Methodist minister and intellectual educated in the United States, Sithole possessed a worldview that blended Christian nonviolence with nationalist fervor, yet his prison experiences appear to have tilted him towards self-preservation. The 1969 renunciation, for instance, can be viewed as a selfish gambit. Facing a potential death sentence, Sithole may have calculated that disavowing violence would mitigate his punishment, safeguarding his life and future relevance at the cost of his revolutionary credentials. This decision, while humanly understandable, alienated comrades who risked everything in the armed struggle, highlighting a perceived egoism where individual survival trumped the greater good. In the 1974 negotiations, Sithole's eagerness to participate underscores this trait. Released amid high-stakes diplomacy, he positioned himself as a key player, potentially leveraging his moderate image to secure a role in any emerging power structure. Critics contend this was selfish opportunism, as he embraced unity talks that diluted ZANU's militancy, all while rivals like Mugabe consolidated power in exile. His brief redetention in 1975, amid internationalist rivalries, further suggests a man driven by personal vendettas rather than a unified vision. By prioritizing his faction's visibility in Lusaka, Sithole arguably prolonged divisions, delaying independence and inflicting unnecessary hardship on ordinary Africans. The 1978 internal settlement epitomizes accusations of selfishness. By joining Smith's transitional government, Ndabaningi gained a ministerial post and international exposure, but at the expense of the radical nationalist cause. This move, seen as a bid for power amid waning influence, ignored the broader African consensus against half measures. Post-independence, his formation of the moderate Zanu-ndonga party and exile further isolated him, reinforcing views of a self-absorbed leader unwilling to subordinate ego to unity. Yet, a non-partisan lens complicates this. Ndabaningi's actions may stem from a genuine belief in negotiated peace, influenced by his clerical background and aversion to prolonged violence. Historical context, decades of detention and geopolitical manipulation, suggests not pure selfishness but a flawed response to impossible choices. Ultimately, his legacy as a founder, tarnished by perceived betrayals, serves as a cautionary tale of how personal ambitions can fracture brotherhood, even when rooted in survival rather than malice.